Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. Today we're going to make a fun card and we're going to use a lot of different supplies, but we're going to use stuff you probably already have or stuff you can substitute, and we're going to make this bumblebee card. And when you open it up it says Happy Bee Day, because as you know I like to have birthday cards on hand, and it's always easier to make a couple cards at once rather while you have your supplies out to reduce waste and be more productive. And this is a really fun project and I think you're really going to enjoy it. This video is brought to you by Rubber Stamp Tapestry. I'm going to be using a couple of their peg stamp sets, the Chamomile Bee in Field of Clover, and also their brand new beautiful Day stamp set, which is nice because you have these really nice big sentiments, and I love to put a big sentiment in the middle of a card because I'm not very wordy when I write cards and it takes up some of the real estate, so I don't feel like I have to be that clever coming up with something to say. The only thing you might not be able to find are these staples here. These are Moldy Oldie Fascinator staples from EK Success. They were popular probably 10 years ago, and I had a bunch. I got one for a gift and I hadn't really used them much, so I thought, you know what, that's a great opportunity to use this, but you could use a brad or just a regular household stapler. So let's get right into it. The first thing you're going to do is a really fun and inky background. By the way, I'm going to have a coupon code in the video description for your order at Rubber Stamp Tapestry, so you can save a little money on all the goodies you're going to want, because we're going to be using Distress Oxide, so those are fun, and those will be included in the coupon code discount. So the first thing I'm doing is I'm grabbing a stencil, and this one happens to be a Crafter's Workshop one, and it's got a bunch of different hexagons. You could obviously cut something like this by hand or with a die cutter if you don't have this particular stencil, but you know, use what you have. It doesn't really matter. You don't have to use honeycomb, but I just think it looks really good with this motif. And then I'm actually gonna like kind of pull it off the edge so I don't have it all kind of blocked in. And we all have a lot of washi tape, at least I do. I don't know, a lot of people told me that they had way more washi tape than they could ever use, and this stuff is really great for holding stencils down to your paper if you can find the end of it. Oh my, there we go, there's the end. It's also great for holding your die cuts onto paper if you're trying to like die cut something very precise and you don't want the paper to slip if you don't have like a magnetic platform or something. So great tip there. So I'm just going to stick it down a couple places, and I like to make sure I'm sticking it so I am trapping the stencil and the paper together. So I don't just want to tape it on the outsides, I want to get that paper stuck. And now I'm going to use some Distress Oxide inks. These are a lot of fun. I used them a ton when I first got them, and then I wanted a little break from them, and now I'm like back using them like crazy because they are so much fun. And I did get a lot of people ask about these. I do have a video on how to make these sponge daubers, but they're essentially a makeup wedge folded in half and glued into a glass chess piece. But if you don't have glass chess pieces, and actually I think these work a little bit better, I've done the same with bottle caps. So save your soda bottle caps and do the same thing. I feel like these are less likely to pull out. I feel like these might pull out eventually, so just kind of keep that in mind and use what you have. And the thing I like about the Distress Oxide inks, you could use regular Distress inks too, guys. Don't feel like you have to go and get these if you have Distress inks or any other ink you like. The fun thing about these is that they're really opaque, like a pigment ink, but you also get that really cool effect when you add water. We're actually going to be using a homemade spray mist with them to get us a really cool shimmer and also kind of reaction. So this particular stencil by the Crafter's Workshop, I'll try to find it to link it up for you. I got it several years ago at a stamp show. The nice thing about this is it has a bunch of different size, different scale hexagon patterns, but since it's not the whole, I have to pick it up and shift it over. It's not a big deal, but I just wanted to let you know that in case you'd rather have a stencil that was a little bit more complete, so that you didn't have to bother with that. It doesn't bother me at all, like I said, but you might be moving it around a couple times to get your pattern. So just kind of keep that in mind. It actually might be a little easier to line it up like that so I can get a couple things to hold my place. So I'm going to move my tape just because I want to make sure I'm going to get that paper too. You do have to be careful not to go through some of the holes on the side, or you'll end up with some smaller marks. It's not the end of the world if you do. That happened to me on my last card, and I don't think you could notice it unless I told you. So not a big deal. Nothing's a big deal. We're making cards, we're having fun. And since these colors are pretty close, what I'll do is I will kind kind of pounce out as much as I can, then I'll pick up my next color. I don't really find that I have a contamination problem with my inks that way. And I find that the more I use the sponges, the better they work. So like when you make a brand new dauber and you're using that, it could be very frustrating and you could feel like you're just not getting any ink, but the more it fills up, the better it works. So now I'm going to remove this, and we've got that cool background, and you can layer these. So what I'm going to do first is get my shimmer spray. Now to make this, what I did was I used water and I used Pearl liquid watercolor. You can buy sprays that are already made that have the pearl in them, and go ahead and use those if you have them, but this is just a lot more affordable. Just get some Pearl watercolor. I use the Dick Blick brand, which is an art supply outfit online, and that works great. I just get the pearl and you can add it to whatever color you want. I'm sure there are other options out there. That's probably the most inexpensive. And now when I blot this, you can see it's kind of lifting up some of the color, or it kind of turns the color kind of white where it hits it, and you just get this really neat kind of effect there. It almost looks like a constellation. Kind of, you could definitely do like a like a cosmos type of motif watercolor like that if you wanted to. So I'm just going to dry this really quick, and then we're going to layer on some more color. Okay, so I wanted to use a few different colors for these next layers. I want to use a yellow, a pink, and a green. So I've got fossilized amber, worn lipstick, and peeled paint. These colors are all available at Rubber Stamp Tapestry, and like I said, you can use the coupon on it in the video description. And basically, again, sometimes I know I should keep a dauber for each color, but I hadn't made the extra ones and I'd gotten the new colors, so I'm just gonna kind of go in with my lightest color first, which is this fossilized amber. You could use the wild honey. It doesn't, use whatever colors you like, and regular distress ink will give you a very similar effect with this technique, so please don't feel like you have to run out and grab this if you know you want to make this card and you want to. It's going to give you a very similar look because it's you're going to see the light of your paper kind of show through. So I'm throwing in some pink here, and I'm just kind of trying to guide it between the honeycomb cells. And since green is a big jump, if I used green after pink, I would just get brown. So I'm going to go in with my green dauber. Basically, I want to get rid of a lot of that cream of the cardstock, and I'm using the Heavyweight Recollections cardstock. You can get at Michael's or on Amazon. I really like it because it's super heavy duty. It doesn't warp when I do a lot of these techniques, and it works really well. And some people have said they've had a hard time getting the Distress Oxide to look good on certain cardstocks. I'm having a lot of luck with this. I think it has enough sizing in it that it lets the oxidization rise. Some papers absorb too much and you don't get that effect. So if you're having that issue, try this cardstock, or try something else. If you use the same cardstock every time and you're not getting the results, look in your stash, see if you have something else. Try on the back sheet of a, you could always try the back sheet of a piece of pattern paper. Maybe that's got more sizing. Try what you have. You just, it takes a bit of experimenting, I think. Of course we see people online make it look effortless. Well, they've practiced it, I mean, that's why. So now I've put this down, and I'm just kind of letting it seep in and interact, and then I'm just going to blot it so it can, what it does is it does remove some of the color, and that's what kind of gives you that cool effect. If you see any place without any effect and you want more, you can just blast it. Now some of the, your background's going to have stuff on top of it, so don't, fuss about it too much. So there we have color, and it's also a little damp now because we've just sprayed it. I don't want it super wet, but damp is good because we're going to do some pressure embossing, and this is a honeycomb embossing folder. It kind of looks like sequin gems almost. This is by Sizzix for Stampin' Up. I don't think you have to buy it from Stampin' Up, but any embossing folder that is like honeycomb would look really well for this, work really well for this, so use whatever you have. And I'm just gonna line it up in there, and then I'm going to go crank this through my machine. When I put this through my Big Shot, only use one of your cutting plates, because if you use both it won't go through. So you've got your base platform and one cutting plate. Okay, that's all you need. So I'll be right back after this is embossed. Okay, now we've got not only this really beautiful shimmer, but we've got a really great texture too. I'll show you the back side just so you can kind of get a better idea of what the texture is without a pattern on it. But this is such a pretty embossing folder. I really, really do like it. So now, because I want a softer look, I'm going to go with a brush, and I'm going to use a brown Distress ink. I have Walnut Stain here. And again, these are all the oxides, but use your regular Distress inks if you want, if that's what you have, or whatever other inks you prefer. You know, you're gonna, this is one of those techniques that I think it's gonna work with whatever inks you use for the most part. You might just have a slightly different effect, but you know what, we're different people, we're gonna have different effects anyway. And that's something that a lot of people seem to discount. You know, you don't need to have exactly what I have, but I do think that these inks are a lot of fun, and I've been enjoying them. But don't take my word for it, you do what's right for you. Okay, so I've made my little border. I also want to do a little black. I'm going to try the black soot, if I can find it. Here we go. It was hiding under the lucky clover. Again, whoops, I should use my black one, but I grabbed this one. So I will have to wash this one now because I grabbed the wrong brush, but that's alright. These can be washed. Just use warm soapy water. You could use dish soap or baby shampoo or anything. It's going to be fine. That gives us a nice little rouging. It helps bring out the design of the embossing. And I just think it looks really, really fun. Now, of course, you can add more inking if you want, but a lot of this is going to be covered up. So you just want, again, to give that impression and carry on the theme of the honeycomb bee theme of this card. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go back to that stencil and we're going to use it for something else. So I grabbed my honeycomb punches thinking I would use those, but they weren't the right size. I have 3, but they're still too small for the card that I want to do. What I really want, I wanted like a punch about this size, but since I didn't have it, and honeycomb is a really easy shape to cut out, I figured I would just trace it. So just grab a pencil and just trace it out. You could of course use an electronic die cutter for this if you wanted to, but I doubt it's going to be quicker than just doing this by hand. And also the other problem I had with my punch, this heavyweight cardstock by Recollections, I cannot punch it with my punches, it's too thick. So even if it was the right size, I wouldn't be able to punch this particular cardstock. I would have needed to go with the lighter one. I mean, I could have grabbed it out of my scrap pile, so it's not a big deal, but I just wanted to let you know that in case, you know, you're going to get that cardstock and not be able to buy any other cardstock and you have a lot of punches, that might not be the best use of your money. Okay, so, and these long bladed scissors are great when you have to cut out things like that. So now we're going to do a little stamping, and I've got the peg stamps I've been using right here, and I'm also going to use one of the bigger stamps from the Beautiful Day set, and I'm going to use archival ink because I don't want this to smudge. Okay, so you want to use archival anytime you're going to use like water-based markers, or you might be getting something wet. That way you don't have to worry about it smudging on you. So look at that nice crisp image, cute little bee. And I also want to put some other little bees there. I'm also going to do those in the archival just because I think I'll probably add some marker or some watercolor or some ink to them. There we go. So I've got all my little bees there with the archival ink. And I like to have this, you can get this in different size pads. I do like the big pads for the inks I use all the time, just because if I'm making up a big stamp or I'm getting ready for a class, it's handy. But there's no other reason that you'd want a big one over a small ink pad if you were just starting out. So I'm just zooming in so you can see a little bit better as we do some other stamping. And yeah, I could have done that a minute ago, huh, Lindsay? Nice smooth move, Einstein, right? So now I'm going to go in with this like clover leaf, and I love these because we have these growing all around our house. And when I was little, I used to pick the clovers, and like he had these little clovers. I used to pick the clovers, and there's like nectar inside. I used to call it honey, but we used to pick these, and then we would pull out the little I don't know what you call them, the little segments, the little flower petals, I guess. And then we could you could suck out the nectar, and it was so sweet and really awesome. Just one of those things that you do when you're a kid, I guess. In the country, there's not a lot to do, so you eat plants that you find in the field. I guess. So I'm just adding these little clover elements, and then I also want to add this honeycomb element that was in the stamp set. Here it is. It's this little little honeycomb section. So I want to do that brown, and I'm just going to throw it in a couple little places like that. And so I think I'm going to use a marker. I got a couple little markers here. I'm going to use this kind of golden yellow to color the bee. Actually, I'll do all the little bees. You could do it brighter. Brighter probably would be better. But anyway. And then the other thing I want to do is actually make myself a little shimmery paint. And so I'm going to scribble my blue marker there. And then I'm going to give it a little blast of my homemade shimmer spray. And I do have a video on how I made the homemade shimmer sprays and all my colored ink sprays, and I'll try to remember to link that up below. If I forget, just go to my channel and search DIY spray ink. And I actually show you how to make the little daubers that I use too, the bottle cap daubers, on that same video. So with the mixture of the ink, the spray ink, and that blue, I'm just coloring the wings. And my stamping won't bleed underneath because I used an archival ink for that. And then I'm going to hit that real quick with the heat tool. Then I am going to grab my fossilized amber. Actually, I could use wild honey because that's actually honeycomb. I'm coloring the honeycomb area. And I'm also rouging the edges. I got way more ink on there than I had bargained for. But I think it's okay. It's going to be fine. I probably should use my blending brush. It'll be fine. Don't worry. Don't worry. Be happy. Is that on there? If that's not a sentiment on there, that really should. It's not. I got a column. I say you really ought to put "Don't worry, be happy." That would be a good one. Maybe they have that planned for round 2. I don't know. Okay, there's a reason why I don't make the sentiments for the stamp sets. We are going to make another little bit of ink there. I'm using the shimmer because I like the shimmer. And I'm going to flick that on. I do want a little more ink. You know what? I'm going to use the Salty Ocean because we use some of that in the card background so it'll match. Let's mix that up. There. See, when you make mistakes, I don't like to call them mistakes, but you know, something happens like you don't expect, like way too much ink over the honeycomb, then you just keep doing more stuff to the card and then it looks inky and intentional and lovely. So that would be my advice if you take anything away from any of my videos. So the next thing I want to do is mount this onto some coordinating cardstock. So what I did, I made envelopes out of these 2 pattern papers, and they're actually a nice thick cardstock weight pattern paper. And then I use the scraps to die cut some embellishments and also for the matting. So it's a great way to get a lot of use out of your materials and have everything coordinate and not spend a fortune and get more cards made at once. So I am a big fan of that. I'm going to dry this real quick though before we do that because otherwise I'm going to smear stuff all over the place. Okay, that's all dry. I'm going to put a little adhesive on the back. Quite a bit actually. My fingers are so gross. I'm going to have to be careful not to get stuff on my design. And then I'm going to use my long blade scissors to trim out this design here. And like I said, the long blades make it really easy. Of course, if you had dies, go ahead and use your dies, but this just makes it really quick and easy with the papers that I have right on my desk. So, you know, you do you, I'll do me. We'll all be happy. Oh, one thing I realized, 2 things I realized. One is that those clovers, I want to make them a little more painterly, so I'm just going to go in with some water because the distress oxides will reactivate and I can get kind of like an inky look there. And the other thing that I wanted to do that I should have done before I glued this down is to ink the edges in some black. But I think that I can actually get both edges at once because they're all straight. I can. So just be careful not to make a big blobby mess, but if you kind of just gently angle this across, you can hit both edges. And there, I got the inside and the outside inked together, and I'm going to set that aside to dry. And then we can work on our background again. So I got that right here. It's pretty well dry. We got a beautiful sheen on that from the shimmer spray. And you could make your shimmer spray with like a powder, like a mica powder, but I find that after a while that clogs. I've not had an issue with using the Pearl liquid watercolor for adding that to the water to make my spray. So that's why I do it that way instead of with the pigment powder now. I used to do it with the pigment powder, but that clogged eventually, and I didn't want that to happen. So what I want to do to embellish this card is use a few things that I had around my craft room. So this is vellum. I just tore a couple pieces of black, just from a piece of black and a piece of teal vellum. And I'm just going to lay that down right like that. I think I want to maybe tear a little more off. That's covering up. The problem with doing an inky background that comes out really well is that you don't want to cover it up afterwards because it looks so nice. I have that problem. I don't know about you, but I always have an issue covering up my background. I want to tear a little bit more off of the teal as well, and I'm going to overlap them. There we go. And I want to overlay this. I just used this the other day too. This die cut actually is really quite old. It's from Cuttlebug, Provocraft Cuttlebug. I got it at Big Lots a few years ago, and it was discontinued at that point when I got it there. I got it for like $2 and like a set of other dies, and I just love it. It's such a nice organic shape that you can add to cards, and I just feel like it goes with so much, and I use it quite often. I don't have a ton of dies. That's something I never really got into purchasing too many of, but I found this one is definitely useful. So to attach this, you can use a stapler, you can use a brad, you could glue it, you could sew it, whatever you want to do. But I thought, since I have this tool here and it's very underutilized, it's called a fascinator. It's I don't know if you can get it anymore. It was one of those very highly specific, borderline useful tools, but I thought, you know, this would be kind of nice because I like those polka dotted bars, staples that I had, and so that's why I'm using this, because I don't like to have things in my life, that in my craft room, that are not getting used. So you can do whatever you like. Now this is going to go here. I'm going to use my awesome foam squares. If you've been watching for a while, you know all about these infamous foam squares that never end, and they're actually really great because they don't seem to unstick ever. They stay nice and attached. And I'm going to put this right here, and then I'm going to tuck a few little die cuts in and around, and these are just some kind of nature ones that actually somebody sent me. They had bought double by accident, and they gave me their doubles, and they're really cute. So I usually just kind of play around a little bit, figure out where I want things to go, and after I'm sure, then I glue it down. It's better to be sure and then not have to rip the glue up. Either way, I think it looks pretty, so I'm just going to leave it like that. And it doesn't so much matter the glue you're using when you're using paper to paper. What matters more is like the applicator, and I really like this because the applicator doesn't seem to clog. I really enjoy the fine tip glue and those really tiny pin like applicators, but then if you don't use them frequently and they get clogged, they're done, they're toast. I haven't been able to bring them back. So actually in this bottle of glue I have, it's half Tombow and it's half Stampin' Up, because I had their lovely little fine tip applicator, but it clogged on me and I could never get it undone, or I'd get it undone for like one session and then the next time I used it, it would be clogged again. So for me, it's not as super precise as like the Stampin' Up or the Ranger fine tip applicators, but I find this to be more valuable because it doesn't clog on me, and I don't have it sparks joy and not annoy. So that's what I try to do. Find things that spark joy but don't spark annoy. And now I'm going to put a few little brads in here. I thought I had bumblebees, but I didn't, but I did have some yellow butterflies. So I am going to make 3 holes where I want these butterfly brads to be. And this is just a piece of foam, and this is just a needle tool. You could use a thumbtack. And grab these 3 little brads here. Those, I always I'm trying to be able to share where I got things. I got these at Martin's. They were like definitely clearance, because something's at Martin's, it's been like probably over for a while. And these were by Making Memories, so I know they're long gone because that company's been out of business for several years. But I just thought they were really cute little butterflies, kind of. I think they were like a princess themed scrapbooking pack. But I thought they were nice now. I still like to use brads. I like to use eyelets. I know a lot of people probably think they're passe. You don't have to use them if you don't like them. You could put a button or nothing, or a sequin would be pretty. You know, something small, just like it's a recipe. You use the ingredients you have on hand, but you can follow the same recipe and end up with something that's totally you, but and worthwhile, and something that, you know, you can get value from this lesson. So the next thing I want to do is grab my card base and stamp the inside. I'm just going to set this aside for a second, give it a little extra minute to dry. I'm actually going to tear off this sheet because I don't want to get ink on the back of my card, and that's possible because that ink might still be a little damp. And I want my Ranger Archival ink for this. Okay, it took me a second to find everything. I did clear off my table before I made this card, after I made the first card, because I made such a mess. I'm just making the same mess, the same mess again. But you know what? If you're going to make a mess, might as well get a couple cards out of it. That's what I say. Alright, so I've got it nice and inky. I can tell because it's shiny. And the thing I like about this particular stamp is that the happy is actually open, so I can color them in. But before you color it in, you do want to heat set it, unless you're going to let it dry for a couple minutes. Otherwise, you're going to get black ink on your marker. And since this is archival ink, I want to use a water-based marker. If I wanted to use a Copic marker, I would have wanted to stamp that with Memento because that's a Copic compatible ink. So that's you know, something you want to keep in mind when you're stamping or when you're picking what ink you're going to use to stamp. Make sure that it's going to match up with the color medium you plan to use if you plan on doing any coloring. But I like this because you could totally customize it to whatever you're making. So there, I've got that sentiment all done, and that marker should be instantly dry. So now, before I even put adhesive on, I like to just look at it and make sure I'm not going to be really off with anything. It looks like my card base was a smidgen larger than the top, so I could either try to line it up perfectly, but actually what I think will be easier is to kind of line it up on two sides and then trim off any excess. So that's what I'm going to do. Anytime I do like a really inky background, let's zoom out a smidgen for you. Anytime I do a really inky background, I like to use lots of adhesive because the warping of the paper, sometimes your paper will warp a little bit if it's really inky, and if you've embossed, you're going to have fewer contact points, so you really want to make sure that everything is going to adhere and stick down really well. So go generous with adhesive. I get generic adhesive for my ATG gun, so I don't have to feel badly about using a lot of it. And this was going to be tough for me to line up because I'm not sticking my head over it like I usually do, because I don't want my head in the camera blocking your view. But basically just line it up as good as you can, and once you've determined it's down pretty good, then you can press it down. I am going to go over to my paper trimmer and, oh, I got it a little crooked, but you get the gist. I'm going to trim off the edges and I'll be right back. And there we have it. And generally, if I am doing a card like this, I will make the inner panel, I'll trim it down so it's 1/4 of an inch smaller than the outside panel, so I'll have 1/8 of an inch border, but I didn't want to sacrifice any of my background because I was enjoying it so much, so I decided to make it flush with the outside of the card. Both of these are pretty much identical, but they're so much fun to make, and I love that each background you do is a little bit different, so it just kind of adds to the kind of fun of a project like this. And I've already made my envelopes ahead of time, but I showed you in the video earlier this week how I made these envelopes. Very easy, just measure your card corner to corner. This is 7 inches, add 1 inch for 8 inches, cut an 8-inch square, and then you just fold the paper around the card, and it works just great. So so there you go, and I make it so the pattern's on the inside so that you can easily address the outside, and there you go. You've got 2 birthday cards ready to go the next time you need them. I'll have links to all the products that I used in the video description. Please feel free to try this with what you have at home though, and if you do go shopping at our sponsor Rubber Stamp Tapestry, you can find them at pegstamps.com. Make sure you use the coupon code so you can save some money on your supplies. I think that's pretty much all I have to say for this project. It was a lot of fun to make. I want to thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please hit that thumbs up button and subscribe if you're not already a subscriber, and share it with friends that would find value in it. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, happy crafting!